Right. Hello and welcome to tonight's Get in Tune. I'm Michael Gracia, and I've got a really fun show planned for tonight. I'm talking with a friend of mine who has had a nice long career in the comic industry, knows so much about comics. He's a colorist, he's a writer, he's done so many things. I'm just going to bring him on. It is John Wilcox. Hello, John.
Why, hello there, Michael.
How you doing?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
Doing good. I'm going to put up on the bottom is John's Twitter, John A. Wilcox.
That's me.
All right. And it looks like we already got a comment from somebody named MV Sparks. It says, hey back. So
hello. Hey, MV.
So how you doing today, John?
I'm doing well. Taking it easy. You know, it's post-Thanksgiving time.
Mm-hmm.
It's starting to think about Christmas time. And that's about that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm in the same feel. I'm doing I'm sorry, I'm just turning off my I'm putting on my do not disturb on my phone so no one bugs us.
I should have done that. Let's just hope no one calls me.
I'm actually starting my Christmas card today. I need to get it done in the next couple of days to send out. I
used to send them out. I do them online now because at one time it was so daunting. I was sending out about 130, 140 cards that I would get. I would draw. Usually I'd have some friend like Joe Sinnott or whoever ink it. And then I would have them printed in black and white, and I hand colored each and every one individually.
Wow.
No two alike, totally different color schemes, everything.
That's amazing.
And it was while I was, in the heart of doing lots of color. So what I would do is I would work along and I go, all right, instead of a break, I'm going to color 10 cards.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. And I go, all right, so color 10 more later. And by the end of a week, I had everything colored and went from there. Nowadays, I do I do an image usually on Photoshop or some such thing. And I just do it online.
Yeah, I'll draw. I did all this digitally. Usually, I drew the sketch on paper. I took a photo with my phone, airdropped it to my computer, and then in Photoshop, I was laying it out, re-editing, and doing stuff. And I'm working on the inks now and the colors. So, but that'll get printed up. I send out about 70, I think, between family and friends. So, and I end up having to buy 100 though, just the way they sell them.
Yeah. I'm not doing a card for just about 6 or 7 people. I am hand painting kind of psychedelic birdhouses.
Interesting.
Doing them all in acrylics, just for a couple of friends, coincidentally all female. And that's what I'm doing this year. It struck me to do that, and I thought, why not?
Yeah, no, that sounds cool. So let's start learning a little bit about you. Why don't you tell us about how you got into comics? What was your influences growing up that said I want to do comics as a job? Okay,
well, that's an interesting story. Hopefully,
okay.
I can't ever remember not loving comics. First comic strip, I saw comic strips before comic books because here in Connecticut, my folks would always get a local paper called the Norwalk Hour, and they would get the New York Daily News. And I lived for that Sunday section with everything from Dick Tracy and Lil Abner, Prince Valiant, all that kind of stuff. And the Bigfoot stuff, Beetle Bailey, Hagar, that sort of thing. And so I was born, let's preface this, I was born in 1960.
Okay.
And so by around the age of 7 or 8, I started reading comic books. My earliest memory, I don't know that it's the first comic book I ever read. I just know it's the first one I remember reading. Was I was in a barber shop here, John the Barber, and they had a coverless copy of a Marvel's Greatest Comics.
Okay.
And it had a Fantastic Four story with the Submariner. And I just remember going, this is just ridiculously cool. And then it was whatever, when you're a little kid, your folks buy you whatever they buy you. So my father would come in with, sometimes it would be Archie stuff, or it would be Captain America or Doctor Strange, or Amazing Spider-Man, things like that.
Yeah.
And it was the stuff for me. And that was a great time when you think about comic books in 67, 68.
Yeah.
So you had new guys like Jim Steranko and Neil Adams coming in, and you had the height of Kirby, and toward the end of the run of Ditko had just left, and he was soon to emerge over at DC with other stuff, and Don Heck, the Severins, just loads of stuff at Marvel. Gene Colan is a whole story unto himself, and great stories at that time. Stan was transitioning out for the first time, and Roy Thomas was writing the bulk of Marvel stuff. So it just captured my imagination. And when I think back, one of the things I loved, and it's one thing you're always told to do in superhero stuff, if you're doing an ongoing series, find a way in each issue to show the name of each person and give an example of their personality and power. So that's why people would speak things that sound more writerly, like, Reed Richards, what are you doing? Well, that's so that the new reader, because the phrase every comic is someone's first is so true. So now I know he's Reed Richards. I'll learn that he is the husband of Sue Richards, formerly Sue Storm. I'll learn that Johnny Storm has a hot temper and the Thing is strong, and all that stuff. And I just loved it. It was something I didn't know I could do, but I knew I wanted to do. And I would sit and I would try and copy things when I wasn't taking the New York Sunday Daily News and silly puttying all the color comics and stretching them out. Mm-hmm. And it just it rang a bell. And I think by the time I hit my late teens, I had a brief period where I wasn't reading comics, and then I came back to comics around the late 70s. Yeah, around 79, 80. I had stopped reading around 75, 76. I forget why. I don't know. Maybe there was I might have been kidnapped. I might have lived a second life in Sweden that I don't remember.
Yeah.
But before that, 1978 was big for me because I met my first cartoonist. It was a guy named Mel Casson, who at the time was doing a comic strip called Boomer. It used to be called Mixed Singles.
Okay.
And
Boomer, I know the name Boomer.
I found out through calling the Norwalk Hour that he lived, in fact, 2 streets over from me.
Interesting.
So I called him up on the phone and we had a talk. He said, why don't you come over to the studio? And I came over to the studio and he said, now, are you serious about wanting to get into comics? And I said, I'm very serious. He said, well, then, John, shut up and listen to me. And he talked to me for about 3 hours, and it made a profound change in my thinking, because I went from these people all get together in a magic cave and they're bestowed their cartooning powers to this is a business of people that if you work at it, you can get into it, John. It's possible. And he laid out for me, he showed me things I never forgot, like how to get a smooth wash on color, which is no mean feat, Yeah. But he showed me, like, he took a piece of Strathmore and he pinned it to his workboard, and then he had a spray bottle and he sprayed it, not to wet it, but just moisten it enough. And he said, now, if you put your wash on before it dries, having done that, it will be much smoother than just putting the straight wash on.
Interesting.
And then he showed me things. He showed me basics like how a rapidograph works and what kind of line that is. Yeah. He told me what colors to avoid if you were coloring something. He said, these flare under the printer's light, so don't use these colors. And I avoided those. And he talked a lot about practical things, how to start. He showed me how when he was doing his strip, he would sit and go, all right, I need to build up files. I'm going to think there's a character, for example, in the strip called Arnold. He said, Arnold's in a car. I need some Arnold in a car gags. He said, you may sit there for an hour and have nothing. He said, but then they'll start coming. He goes, Arnold's in a car and he gets a flat tire and Joy walks up. Then that leads to what did they say? And so he would then have a file box that said Arnold car. Then he had Arnold beach, Joy, each character. So that way he would then go and he would work everything in weeks in a comic strip where he'd go, all right, so I need 5 dailies for the Monday through Friday. I need a disposable daily for Saturday and a Sunday. And so he had separate files for all of that. And it just saved him that much thinking. And then he would pencil a week, then he would letter that week, and then he would ink that week. And so that was very interesting. And it started me thinking about, as odd as that seems, because you never think in your early stages, you don't necessarily think about the process.
Yeah.
How is this done? Now, simultaneously, that's when I started buying comic book art because you could get it for next to nothing.
Yeah.
When I say that, my first page was a page from X-Men number 95, which was the second regular issue of, I'm going to call them the Wolverine X-Men.
Okay.
And I paid for this beautiful page that was Cyclops and Nightcrawler fighting Count Nefaria, I believe it was, and the Animen for $22.
Wow.
Think about that. And I was buying pages for like $5 or whatever.
Yeah.
And for my amusement, because I knew I wanted to get in the business, and I always, I wanted to draw, I wanted to whatever, but at the time I was really having a fascination with color. And so I said, let me get these originals and have them reduced to 8.5 by 11. And then I started originally using Luma watercolors. I wasn't yet knowledgeable about Dr. Martens at the time. And by 1981, I was sending in samples to Marvel and to anywhere that would have them, and they would get rejected. And the first rejection came back, and I remember being really angry and thinking, what do they know, for about 10 minutes. And then I got over it, and I'm like, what do they know? They're publishing and I'm not. So I started getting back in touch to the people that rejected the stuff and say, could you do me a kindness and let me know why? What do you feel I should work on? And so I started working on that, and I got to a point where I got a letter from Jim Shooter.
Okay.
And Shooter said, your stuff is as good as anyone else's here right now, John, but we're full up for now. So when I think about it, this was pretty quick. I started sending in samples in 81, and my first job was in spring of 83. And it wasn't even, it was a case where I had sent in a set of samples to someone, and I never heard back from them, but they showed someone else those samples, and they said, hey, want to do some work? So, yes, I'd love to. And that was, I ghosted the color on a Marvel book, ROM Annual number 2. I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't even know if there was a number 3, but it was ROM Annual number 2, Sal Buscema and the British inking team of Aiken and Garvey. And I remember they sent me 2 copies, and I was terrified for like a minute. And I talked with a friend, and I said to her, man, I'm terrified. I got my first job. What if I put the wrong color down? What if I, what if I do something and everything falls on everything else and explodes? And they're like, oh, don't worry about it. And I got off the phone, and I was fine. I said, all right, let's get to it. And then there was no looking back. That was the first thing. And at the time, a thing that I felt wonderful about is when it came out and I finally saw it in print. I didn't care if my name was on it or not. It's like, wow, I did that, and that equaled that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I brought it at the time. I was going up a lot to a studio downtown here in Westport that Leonard Starr and Stan Drake had.
Okay.
And I was showing it to them, and Lenny told me how much he loved the color, and he would ask me questions about the color. And he was always challenging. He'd go, "John, do you know what hue and chroma are?" Like, yeah. He goes, "Explain them to me." And I'd have to hamina. You know, well, you see, the chroma is the intensity, and the hue is the actual color, and blah, blah, blah. But he was always, I think it was, you know, honestly, they took a shine to me. They didn't mind me coming in the studio, and I learned so much from those guys, more than I could ever learn, like you know, from a school or anything, because it was people. I was watching the working process, you know, so that grew and grew. You know, I started branching out. I did a lot of ghosting. I did a bunch of stuff under my own name for years, and I, you know. At my peak, the most I ever colored in one day was, I'm going to say it was around 1988. I colored 43 pages in a day. And it was before I was diabetic, so I was having cans of Coca-Cola and listening to the Who's Quadrophenia in a loop over and over from morning to night, not too loud so it didn't wake up my family. And it was... a ghosted issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that had this like blue manta ray guy. I can't think of his name. I just remember that he was the lead character. And it was also a Thor annual that Don Heck drew. Wow. So that was a joy. It was always a joy to work with Don, and we became great friends. He said he loved the fact, A, that sometimes I used pink in backgrounds because it made colors pop. Yeah. And sometimes I just left a thing white so that the characters had room to breathe. In fact, one guy, there was a time that Jim Salicrup used to jokingly say, you know, sometimes you're Johnny White space. And yeah, he wasn't saying it in a bad way, but yeah. Sometimes people feel that every little tiny bit of that panel must be full of something. When it mustn't. You're telling a story. The color is part of that story. And there are times where you go, I could put some color there, but it's going to compete with what the artist and the writer are telling. So you have to really look at that and go, I'm not going to put something down just to put it down on that piece of paper, you know? So, and that's an acquired thing. It takes you a while to learn what to not do. Well, I mean, a perfect example is like if you ever followed any of the early and then later work from Alex Toth.
Oh, yeah.
Alex was a case of subtractive genius. As his work evolved, it got simpler and simpler because he learned what this person needs 10 or 20 lines to do. I'm going to go with one line, and it's the exact right line.
Yeah.
You know, when he had a wonderful run doing backup stories of Black Canary, and they're just genius. They're sheer genius in execution.
Yeah, no, Toth is one of my heroes cartoons. I'm actually hearing a little echoing. I don't know if that's my end or your end.
I don't know. Mine, I'm just talking into my computer. There's not even a mic here.
Do you have maybe it's your speakers?
I don't know.
Let me see. Hello. See, it's not happening now. I was hearing
okay.
Maybe I needed to be closer to my computer. I don't know.
It could be. Maybe it's the third person we don't know
about. Yeah, no, I wanted to. When you were talking about knowing what to put in and what not to put in, it always makes me think of the Looney Tune Roadrunner cartoons. With actually even before that, the layout artist in Chuck Jones's unit, Maurice Noble, said our backgrounds are you kind of are too realistic. We need to tone them down so our characters are really the stars. Yeah. And if you watch the Roadrunner cartoons, it's exactly what you were talking about. It just gets
and that I think also it's them, but also it was an influence on them of UPA.
Mm-hmm.
Because the UPA stuff was just like a textbook on minimalism.
Yeah.
You know, like Gerald McBoing Boing and things like that. It's stuff. Yeah. And also you can see at that period that Jones was getting more and more abstract on what he wanted to put on the screen.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
But yeah, I think that's in any creative process. You know, I know because I'm also a musician. When you're first learning to play an instrument, you want to do too much, and you learn over time to unlearn, to go simplify, have it mean something, and I think that's the same. It's one of my things about current comics is I feel they are without exception overcolored.
Okay.
And that's about where, you know, that's a choice. It's editorial, I think. Yeah. And that's the one thing, by the way, one thing that I can't stress enough is the influence on what you read as a comic of the editor, because there's nothing that's on that page that they haven't approved. So if the art's too busy or something looks clunky or the story makes no sense, they've had every opportunity to correct that.
Yeah. So, I'm hearing that. Where's it coming from? Give me a second here. I just want to try something.
Oh,
sorry. Hold on. I'm gonna actually plug in my other mic and see if that'll take care of it.
It's Super Mario the Green Lantern, the almost Green Lantern.
Well, I actually do have a which is the mic. This is the mic. I actually do have a bunch of Green Lantern stuff on the shelves. There's what's it called? Paper organizers above, and
okay.
I got an Alan Scott. I got a Hal Jordan. I think I have a Kyle Rayner somewhere. I got a couple of Alan Scotts actually. It's like my shelf. A lot of Dr. Fate, a lot of Star Wars stuff over there.
See, that's what I would have if I could have two really high quality action figures together. I'd have a Hal Jordan Green Lantern, and I'd have Dr. Fate.
Yeah,
and maybe just as a third guy, maybe Dr. Midnight.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
I always thought that was. You know, we all have our preferences. For me, DC had a lot of interesting characters coming out of the Golden Age, particularly Marvel had the scripts.
Yeah.
You know, because there are times where if you want a painful journey, follow the journey of Wonder Woman. Now, the original, you know, William Moulton Marston stuff was great. Yeah. But then by the mid-'60s, she's fighting a giant human-sized egg with a mustache. And I think his name was literally Egg Foo, like that, or Eggy Foo. I wish I was kidding. But it was like by that time, you can, and I swear to you, you can look this up. There are stories where like Superman beat someone up with just his toe. Why not?
I'm sure there are stories out there. The 60s and even some of the 70s was a weird time.
Yes.
Comic stories. You know, actually, that reminds me, just thinking of the little toe. You remember the Plastic Man cartoon?
Of course.
That was how he got out of everything. He was able to wiggle.
Was it the Plastic Man with hula hula?
Yes.
Of course.
And he was always able to wiggle his little toe to solve the problem, whatever it was. But what bothered me about that is I remember reading the comic, and one of the you know, after he gets his powers, he wakes up in the bed and he's like, what's wrong? When he's pulling his face, and he's like, I got no more toes. So like it actually says in the comic he doesn't have toes, and then that was his save the day story, and you know, in all the
those were surreal stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing eventually that DC went on to do very well as their cartoons went on. By the time you hit Batman the Animated, that stuff, that run, and the people don't talk enough about what a fine job on Superman the Animated Series.
Yeah.
That was just brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was moving things a little bit, and my head was moving here and there. There we go. I'm back. I think.
No, that was
so that's that. That's where I started in '83, doing that stuff, ghosting a scary amount of stuff. Because if I take the stuff under my name and the stuff I ghosted, color-wise, I colored over 40,000 pages.
Wow,
that's a lot of pages.
Yeah.
And it's the only thing in comics I don't miss. I did it. I did 40,000 pages, been there, done that, and I got to do a lot of my favorite stuff and my favorite people. Working with Ditko was a joy. And we got off immediately on the good foot because I was coloring a story of his of Fly Girl as a backup to the Archie had started doing the Fly again.
Yeah.
And they gave me the story to do. And I thought, I wonder how Ditko would like this to look. Let me ask him. So I decided to get my nerve up and call him up. And he said, you're the first colorist that's ever asked me that, which surprised me. Yeah. And I said, well, how would you like it to look? He said, I'd like it to look like Salvador Dali. And I said, okay. And I was a big fan of Dali. And, so I tried to add some little surrealist touches. And then he liked it so much that after the fact, he had left in the Archie offices 3 of the pages from the story for me.
Wow.
And they told me, and I said, oh, could you have him sign them? And they asked him, and he wrote me, I got a letter in the mail, a signed letter saying he doesn't sign things. And that's sort of Steve in a nutshell. He was a wonderful man. So people have told all sorts of stories. There are stories occasional where he comes across as very whatever.
Yeah.
But what I got is, if you had a reason to talk to him and you weren't just, total fanning out on him, he was great. He was a great guy. I think he got too overpowered by too many people that wanted a piece of him and wanted him. Steve was all about now.
Okay.
Everyone wanted him to be the guy that does Spider-Man, and to a lesser degree, Doctor Strange. And it's like he took that as people thought that his work after that had no value. They just want the greatest hits.
Yeah. And
Steve was, again, his thing was, I did that. I did that to the best of my ability, and now I'm doing this. I loved, I loved his work on The Creeper, Hawk and Dove, all that stuff. It's wonderful. If you go back, truly underappreciated was Shade the Changing Man, which was just wonderful, wonderful stuff. And even when he went over to do Machine Man, that was so much fun. If you look at it, I think that what he suffered from was he refused to be what people expected him to be. But the one thing he always was just a top flight professional.
Yeah.
So it was fun to work with him. As I said, Don Heck, it was a joy to work with Don Heck. His stuff was so smooth, and the characters were always in motion. Sometimes people have a page and it's too static. Yeah. But Don, his characters, just look at anything where a character's running, and they're running at like 1,000,000 miles an hour. And he was just a joy of a guy. He never quite, I think it took the films for people to give him his props, to go, wow, this guy's not Kirby and he's not Ditko, but he created the Black Widow. He created Hawkeye. He created the Swordsman, so many things. And he was, Pepper Potts and Happy Hogan and all of that. That was a neat story that I had not heard at the time, as we were talking one day, and I had mentioned Shirley MacLaine.
Okay.
And he said, well, she was who I modeled Pepper Potts after. I said, Shirley MacLaine in the film The Apartment, he said, she was beautiful, but she was vulnerable. And that's what I wanted for Pepper Potts. And so that's who, if you look at Pepper at that time, that's who he was doing. He modeled her after Shirley MacLaine.
Interesting. I got to look at those old photos now.
So, but he had a great attitude. He was a fun guy. He told a good joke, as did, if one guy surprised me from the old guard who's funny as anything. And one of the last ones that's still around is Johnny Romita, Sr.
Yeah.
We hit it on like a house on fire because in 88, 89, I was working in the Marvel offices as the Monday cover colorist. And he was a huge fan of Noel Sickles, he used to do a comic strip called Scorchy Smith, which was like an airplane strip. And it was a big influence on Milton Caniff, on Terry and the Pirates. Yeah. And he would get angry because he could talk to people in the office. They had no clue what he was talking about. And we would sit and talk about Sickles, and he was just happy as a clam. And he'd go, "Oh, John, come in my office." And he'd show me these full color oil paintings he had just done of Spider-Man and the whole cast and that were just knocking my eye sockets out. He'd go, "You think this is any good?" Do I think it's any good? Could I have it? Yeah. Is there an answer where I could have it? But he was a great guy. I mean, he was just his work obviously speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. You know, that Spider-Man stuff he did, all the stuff he did. Johnny Romita, who drew a prettier Mary Jane? No one.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
The other night, I think it was last week, I was streaming on, I think, YouTube and Facebook, and I was just sketching, and I was doing a Spider-Man, just Spider-Man swinging on a web. I don't know if I posted it on Twitter, if you saw it or not, but somebody asked me, who was your favorite Spider-Man artist? And it's Romita, a senior, not junior. I mean, his work. It was the era I grew up in the 80s. I watched Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. All that was based on his art. And
oh yeah,
it's gorgeous stuff.
And Johnny was a fixer too. You can look back in the 70s on a lot of covers. Mm-hmm. And no matter who, like it can be a Gil Kane cover, it could be a Kirby cover when he came back, and some of that, the faces were still redrawn by Johnny. Mm-hmm. Because that was who they were, there were two people that epitomized the Marvel style. Oh, that was my lucky cat that fell. I guess he's not so lucky. It was Johnny Romita and John Buscema.
Yeah, two of my favorites.
And can you argue with that?
Yeah, I mean, and I just speaking of Buscema, I belong to a Facebook group. It's on Facebook where it's just like Buscema's Conan. It's just all pictures. People are posting of his Conan work, which to me is one of his best work he's ever done.
He wanted to be Hal Foster.
Yeah, I can see that.
And you can see it. And John Buscema and Don Heck, they both excelled at something that others not necessarily so. They both drew the best horses you'll ever see. Mm-hmm. Because they both loved that. Don Heck, his favorite stuff was Western stuff. He loved drawing Western stuff, and he loved drawing pretty girl stuff. Yeah. And again, Buscema is one of those guys, he could just do anything.
Yeah.
And I loved him inked by his brother Sal. Mm-hmm. That was a great team. Yeah. But I never did much. I'm trying to think. I must have done some sort of Buscema thing at some point, color-wise. I know I did a bunch of Sal stuff on Spider-Man. I did it on, what was it called at the time? Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yes.
He was doing that, and he did some of, and I did some of the McFarlane Spider-Man stuff as well, which was a lot of fun too. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, some people, if there's one person that I loved, and he gets respect, but I think he belongs there with Kirby and Ditko, and that is Dave Cockrum. I know he's a generation on, but his design sense was brilliant. I look at those when he redesigned the new X-Men, you know, Storm is his, Nightcrawler is his, Colossus. You know, he streamlined Banshee, he redefined Wolverine, you know, and he slightly updated the Adams designs on Cyclops and Marvel Girl at the time. And he did that great Warhawk thing. Of course, go over to DC and all the stuff he did on Legion of Superheroes, where he redesigned everyone. He was a joy to color because the stuff was so incredibly clean and well composed. Yeah. You know, I remember doing a story for Marvel Comics Presents that was a Doctor Doom one. And the first page is a splash of Doctor Doom looking imperious, sitting on a throne. And I was just like, oh, man, I almost hate to color this. It's just so gorgeous. You know, I did that. I did another one for them that was, it was some group that was all of like X-Men bad guys that were an adventure group. It was the Blob and Mystique and was it Pyro and someone else that were on some sort of adventure. That was Cockrum. And then I did this Starjammers series that was so much fun. It was like a 248 or 26. I think it was 248-page stories, inked by Jeff Albright. Did a nice job on Cockrum. Very respectful stuff, and it was just pure fun. You know, that's the thing at its best is I got to work, and it was work, but I got to be a kid at the same time and go, oh boy, I'm coloring Spider-Man. You know, here's Peter Parker, there's J. Jonah Jameson. Yeah. You know, I had a funny thing said to me years and years later that I never thought of until he said it. I was talking with Jim Salicrup, who is one of the finest editors I've ever worked with. He was just brilliant. He said, we were talking about something, and he said, well, you and I are part of the Spider-Man legacy. And up until that, I never even thought about that. I thought, well, you know, it was a wonderful thing to do, and I'm happy to. But you never think about the historical context of what you do while you're doing it. Yeah. It's a job, and you hope you get another one next month. You know, thankfully, where I got a lot of work is I didn't miss deadlines.
And that's
you know, again, with 40,000 pages plus, I never was late with even one. Yeah. And that I wouldn't allow myself to be. The very first time in 1989 that I had kidney stones, I was in the hospital and I felt alien was coming out of my body. And I was hopped up on Demerol, which didn't have a big effect on me. And I went home that night and I colored because the job had to be done.
Exactly.
That's what you do.
Yeah. No, exactly. You know, that's the way you keep your jobs, especially in the comic industry. If you hit deadlines, you know, I've taught college for 16 plus years. I'm not doing it right now, but I've taught college. And one of the things, and a lot of the students want to get into the comics, the animation biz, all that stuff. And the thing I always tell them is hit your deadlines. All the projects I give them, I grade on deadlines because I feel like when I'm working with younger kids, it's different. But when I'm working with college students, I feel my job is to train them for the professional world. And you know, I'm like, well, if you're not turning me in projects on deadline or even before, how are you going to, meet them in the real world?
Yeah.
You know?
I was at a convention once, and someone was showing me 2 pages they had done, and it was inks, and it was okay. You know, it wasn't professional level.
Yeah.
And I said, how long did that take you? And they said a couple months. And I said, what's your favorite book? And it was like Spider-Man. I said, all right, how often does Spider-Man come out? Comes out every month. So that's right. So I said, at the very least, if you want to work in the business, you need to be able to ink at least one entire book well per month.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to wait for you. They're not going to go, well, for this entire run of Spider-Man, it's come out monthly, but this guy, the next issue is going to be in 7 years. And I told him, I said, realistically, you also have to know there's someone right behind your shoulder that wants that job too. So you have to build up speed, and you have to build up dependability, and you also have to be able to assess what's wrong with your work and how to improve it and work. I said, right now, when you leave here, I said, how much time do you spend drawing a day? Maybe an hour. I said, well, make it 2 or make it 4. Always do more. The more you work and be self-analytical, because that's another thing, is people that are new to things think they're much better than they are. They think, well, and no one else is going to notice that I'm copying pick an artist, when it's like every editor is going to notice that. You need to know that. That's reality.
That's the truth. I mean, it goes back to some of the things I would tell.
Yeah. By the way, I hate to interrupt you, but your mic is really crackly.
Is it? Let me say hello. Let me try going back to my other mic. It works fine when I'm solo, so.
There's an evil voodoo I am putting forth.
I don't know. I'm hearing this stuff. Let's say go back. Book mic. Echo cancellation is on.
Yeah, that sounds like 1,000 times better.
Okay.
And you sound younger.
Oh, that's always good. I forgot what I was going to say, but it's okay. Anyway.
Well, you're talking about teaching and
teaching, yeah. And you were telling like people want to be concept artists, whatever. I say, take a picture of your work. Now go online and look up a professional comic book artist, concept artist, whatever it is. Is your work at least equal to what they're doing? And be realistic and honest with yourself. If you are nowhere near, like you want to work for a company like Blizzard, know, and you're nowhere near what they're putting out as a concept artist, don't look at Blizzard as your target goal. Start smaller. Find a company that you fit with and keep practicing until you get to Blizzard level. It's just.
And that's the thing, a thing that I thought, this is classic and it applies to so many people, is I remember once, speaking of Stan and Len, someone that I knew at the time brought their portfolio to show Lenny Starr. And Lenny Starr is like the lad. He could make anyone cringe, by the way. I'll get there, but first let me go back and go. I was at a convention once, and I got different professionals to do me sketches. And I brought them to show Stan and Len, and over each one, Len put a piece of tissue paper and corrected it.
Oh my God.
And I thought, these are guys that are working on books in the business. They would cringe. Like, see, the eyes don't track. Now they track.
Yeah.
But this person brought along their portfolio.
Oh my God.
And Len opens it up, and the guy says, but it's not my best stuff. And Len just closed it right back up and said, come back when it is your best stuff. And he never saw him again.
Yeah.
Because some people don't want to hear that. Why would you show people not your best stuff? Well, what is your best stuff, and where is that? And why isn't that what's in your portfolio?
Exactly. I mean, you just basically gave my lectures in class that I give to my students in class 1,000 times over. It's.
And there's no shame in that. There's no shame in not being good enough yet.
Yeah.
Because even, again, going back to them for a moment, I was in the Marvel offices once, and who was leaving there at the time? But Archie Goodwin. Okay. So Archie came to me and said, I've got all these magazines and stuff all in my office. I don't want them. You want anything, John? He said, and so I came back the next day. I took a train in with a knapsack, and I filled them with all these European books. I had no idea, illustration magazines and stuff. And I was showing them to Stan Drake, who was at the time doing The Heart of Juliet Jones, and one of the top realistic illustrators ever. And he was like a little kid. He's looking at the stuff. He stops. He goes, "Look at how this guy put these shadows on that pants. I'm stealing that." And he's showing it to Len, and they're like little kids looking, oh boy. And that's the thing is a true artist is eternally a student.
Yes.
It never ends.
Yes. No, I don't disagree. And, speaking of the European artists, they have a whole different way of teaching than over here in America. I had a friend I was in my master's class with in one of my classes, and he did a year in London and like a year abroad studying. And the way he was taught art, when he came back, his work was 1,000 times different than the way he drew before he left. It was definitely better, but it was more, he had a bit more realism to him, but there was a looseness and his anatomy was better, but there was a looseness, but more of a painterly quality, even to his sketches, than what you see from American artists and how we learn.
Well, I think that the danger we have with, I have nothing against, say, the Kubert School or SVA or whatever, is too many people learn comic books from comic book artists. When the best comic book artists, that's not where they learned. They were learning commercial illustration or fine art, or and they were bringing in, rather than saying, I want to be like, pick someone, whoever. Yeah. Who did they learn from, and who did the person that they learned from learn from?
Exactly. I'm a huge fan, going back to Hal Foster that you were mentioning, and like Alex Raymond and all that artwork. And I remember I'll talk to a student and be like, who do you look at? He goes, I look at Jim Lee. Okay, but who did Jim Lee look at? How did he learn to draw? Who was he learning from? And who was the guy that he learned, learned from? You can look at all these guys. Comics realistically started as we know them in the 30s for the most part. Yeah. Before that, what were they looking at? They were looking at different types of art. You're probably going back looking at Renaissance painters, for the most part, and you're looking at how they handled anatomy and their, so I like, for me, I don't feel, there are comic artists I love, don't get me wrong, like I mentioned Romita, and I'll look at his work and I'll see what he's done, but I'm going back even further and I'm looking at all these other people, and I pull an influence from everywhere.
That's what you have to do.
Yeah.
It's like I had a conversation with, I'm going to choose to not name this inker. And we were talking, and one of my great influences artistically is Vasily Kandinsky, the abstract artist.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
I do a lot of abstract painting.
Okay.
And the artist said, well, then how can you color representational art? I said, you're kidding me, right? He's like, no, if you're an abstract. I said, but I'm an artist, and I observe things, and just because one thing is my preference doesn't mean it's my only ability. Now it's funny, there's stuff where years later I didn't even know that I was doing it at that time. I was looking back on some issues of Excalibur that I had colored, and it was all in these muted tans and blue grays and things like that. I was at that time, I was really absorbing the Blue Rider movement of German, impressionism and expressionism and abstract and that. And I was bringing in non-traditional colors into comics because, and I wasn't even necessarily aware, but I'd go, is there a reason that can't be purple? Or, whatever. And some people, they were doing that in a different way, in a much harmonic way. That was Petra Goldberg, was a brilliant colorist. They used to call her Purple Petra. But she was wonderful. If we want to get into the history of color for a moment, you're not going to find two finer colorists than Marie Severin and Stan Goldberg. A lot of people don't even know that when you see old Marvel, when you see the first issues of Spidey, Fantastic Four, that's all colored by Stan. all of it. He came up with, just think about it, like we were talking one day, he's like, yeah, I came up with the colors on Dr. Doom and this one. And I'm like, oh, really? You know, just like, oh, well, and then I had a cup of tea and you know,
Yeah.
And it's just sheer brilliance. When you look back at that stuff, it's simple, but it's right.
Yeah.
And Marie was that as well. Marie was, I don't know, she was sort of, I think of her as like the Mozart of color.
Mm-hmm.
And those two, there are people that are different, but I can't think of anyone that tops their abilities ever in comics.
Yeah. No, they're both great. I'm sorry, I'm hearing that echo again. Let me come closer. So yeah, no, you're right. But I wanted to say this about comics when you were talking about how you were into abstract. You know, I understand people do, you know, superhero comics. I've drawn them, and you know, you're going for more of a realism. But to me, comics has always been an abstract of reality anyway.
Yes.
You're going, so to have someone say to you, how can you do a commercial art piece like color comics when to me it's an abstraction, just makes no sense, you know?
Well, this particular nameless inker was a very talented inker, but a very limited thinker. And someone once said about him to me, and I thought, yeah, that's about right. They said, put him in a room of no matter how many people, and he will find a way to become the least important person in the room. And so, wow, that's cold. But
I like it.
nonetheless true.
Yeah. So let's move on a little bit from your coloring stuff. You're also a writer of comics.
Yes.
How did you get into writing comics?
You know what? I had no ambition to write comics, but then I was asked to write one. Will you write this? And I always thought, say no to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asked to write Underdog.
Oh, love Underdog.
Unfortunately for a less than reputable publisher.
Okay.
But it was fun. And I called up a friend of mine and I said, this guy, Mark, that I knew at the time, and said, hey, want to write this with me? He's like, sure. And I knew the stuff inside out, you know, and the toughest thing about writing Underdog is everything has to rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, let's see. We got it. The first story's got to be Simon Barr's Sinister, you know, Underdog. And so Simon and Cad were there. And at the time, in the news, the big deal was they had just brought back red M&Ms because they were gone for a while because of whatever the dye, red dye number 2 or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
They just brought them back. And I said, how about if Simon came up with a thing that gets rid of the color red? We'll call it the Eradicator. and I just remember something where Underdog's ride was something about, or Santa Claus will be Burl Ives because he'll have lost the red. He'll just have the white. And we put ourselves in the book too at the beginning and the end. At the beginning, we're in these diners that we named after diseases. There was Sam and Ella's diner, and then the Greek diner Trig and Osis.
Oh.
So in the first story, the first part of the story, we're there and we just open up this new pack of M&Ms and Simon comes in and hits it with the Eradicator and the red M&Ms turn white. And at the end, we open them up and they're regular again after Underdog is done on his thing. But it was fun to do. And it was, you know, I did that. I did Mighty Mouse, which was also fun. Yeah, when I grew up, I always thought Mighty Mouse, you know, this is pre John Kricfalusi reinventing New Adventure, you know, with Bakshi doing the New Adventures of Mighty Mouse. I always thought as a kid it was kind of corny, but it was fun. Mm-hmm. And so did a thing for that. And then that led to working on a bunch of Archie stuff. That also, then that became, Archie I did for a while, a lot of stuff that was a lot of fun. And then I got to work for Rich Howell on Elvira. He was a great editor to work for. And what was interesting is when you did Elvira stories at that time, Elvira herself approved of every script.
Really?
So the fact that she enjoyed the scripts we did was a lot of fun. I got to do a fun thing, by the way, and that's when I was a kid, I had written this parody song. I don't know why, but it was called Blood-Sucking Weasels from Outer Space. And I had a line in the song that I still think would be like the perfect movie poster. We don't want them. We don't need them, but against our will, we feed them. I think that's so. Never did anything with the song. Wrote it as a kid. It was just a goof. So in one of the Elvira stories, I had a poster. I had them draw a poster in the background. Elvira is talking to me. I just finished filming Blood-Sucking Weasels from Outer Space, which meant nothing to no one else but me. I was just like, oh boy, Elvira was in my song movie, a movie of my song. But so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because I did some scripts with that with another friend of mine and some on my own. And my friend, it was okay, but he never had a grasp of the character. He didn't understand. He wanted to make the stuff more, I'm going to say more adult. Mm-hmm. And that's not, Elvira is all tease and she's winking at you the whole time.
Yeah.
And he didn't quite grasp that. But it was fun to do. And, and then I did some stuff for Felix the Cat, which also led to doing a bunch of scripts for a Japan-only series called Baby Felix and Friends that I wrote. I think I did 32 scripts for it, 11-minute segments. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun.
Wow.
So, and those I wrote. Now, see, like Archie stuff, I would always draw out. I would do it on 8.5 by 11, and I would just thumbnail it out. And I knew when I was doing Riverdale High, for example, that Stan Goldberg was going to be drawing it. So I knew it was in great hands. Yeah. And he would call me up and he'd go, how about if I combine these two panels? I'm like, oh, that's even better. And he was just like wonderful to work for. You knew, like, if you're doing Archie stuff and Stan Goldberg, and at the time Henry Scarpelli was inking it, was great on his own. And his son used to be on the show one day at a time. He was Valerie Bertinelli's, well, I'm losing the ability to speak, Valerie Bertinelli's boyfriend in the series. Okay. And he was a phenomenal inker. So it was a joy to work on that stuff.
If you don't mind me asking, I'm sorry, what year was this?
Riverdale High was 89, 90.
Okay. So this is long before I worked for Archie. I was there in 2001.
Uh-huh.
So, but I knew Stan, so that's why I was asking.
What a great guy. I miss him. In fact, the last time I was in New York. I haven't been in New York since 2014, where they at the New York Comic-Con, they were having a tribute to him, and they asked if I would come in and speak.
Oh wow, that's
nice. Like, of course, it's Stan.
Yeah.
But as I am disabled nowadays, over 20 people kicked my cane out from under me. So I said, all right, I think I have concluded coming here. So it happens.
Yeah.
But one thing I'm going to point out, because I have a good story to tell you, is you showed me earlier Jose Luis Garcia Lopez behind you.
He's behind Mario. And
so here's my fan, and I was already a professional at this time, but I never stopped being a fan.
Yeah.
You can ask people, like, if I'm at a thing and like Walt Simonson is there, I'll always harass a free drawing out of him or Eric Larson or whoever. But Jose was doing drawings, and he was doing them really inexpensively at the time, like $20, Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, what a drawing. And he was doing these, he would do a detailed figure, and then he would ink it with marker, which I never like. I never liked the marker. Mm-hmm. So I said, I just want a shoulders up of Diana Prince in just pencil. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, are you sure that's all you want? Yes. And so he drew it. And as he drew it, he's digging it. And he drew it like fashion magazine style.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't his usual. I mean, it has his realism, but he just drew Diana, but he also put the tiara on her. And it's just the shoulders up. And when he finished, he said, I hate to ask you. I'm like, yes. He said, could I have this? Because he loved it. He said, I've never done anything like this. I said, no, that's my drawing. And he was offering me, he had like beautiful full things he had done, like Catwoman and all these other things in a little case in front of him. And he offered me 2 or 3 of them in exchange for this. Like,
wow.
Sorry there, Jose, but this is my drawing.
That's hysterical.
And I still have it to this day. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece. Mm-hmm. He is just another guy that if you can find, I can only find one fault with Jose's work. There's not enough of it.
Yeah.
Anything he does, you just go, you understand why he ended up doing so much of the design for merchandise and stuff for DC.
And the pictures behind me come from all that.
Oh, from like the style guides and stuff?
Style guide. They're prints of, I mean, I can't pull up my computer and no, I could. Mm-hmm. The Dr. Fate up there, it's the Teen Titans. I got the Flash behind there. Like that Flash behind Mario, if I move Mario real quick, you'll see that's like what they put on mugs and shirts and
Mm-hmm. I know the exact pose.
Yeah.
Now let me tell you, and I know that there's a character you like. Didn't he just draw one of the absolute best Dr. Fates?
Oh yeah, Dr. Fate.
I mean, come on.
Oh, let me get it down here. Right there.
Yep. Look at that. And again, it almost, look at that one piece, and it's funny. That almost looks, the cape looks kind of Walt Simonson-y to me.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So, but again, those are two guys that tread in a beautiful territory. They both have impeccable design sense.
Yes, I don't disagree there.
And Walter Simonson is one of the most professional beard wearers.
He's got a good beard.
What I know, his beard is at another level. His beard is at Ted Kaczynski Unabomber level beard, but in an elegant, professional, lovable way. Walt is I don't know if you've ever talked with Walt, but he is a swell guy. He is.
I've met him at shows once or twice.
For years, he did something. You have to know, one of my favorite DC books as a kid was The Metal Men, drawn by Ross Andrew and Mike Esposito. That was the good stuff.
Okay.
And then they brought it back later on, and Walt drew it very early on, and he did a great job. And I would see him in the early '80s at cons. And I go, hey, Walt, can I get a quick sketch of Platinum out of you? Oh, not drawing today, blah, blah. And then once I'm at a con, and a friend of mine, I don't know why, and I'm glad I don't know why, had brought in handcuffs. And I said, let me see those for a minute. And I went over to Walt, and I said, Walt, are you going to do me a drawing of Platinum today? It's like, sure. and it took him, because it was like 3 minutes. And I still have that, and it's gorgeous, But his Metal Man, and each time I've seen him over the years, he'll do for people when he's in a sketching mood, he'll do really quick little sketches for free. And I have no problem being a fanboy with that. And I'll go, want to draw me gold today? Okay. Here's gold. I got gold. I've got mercury. I may have lead.
Yeah.
I don't have tin and beautiful yet. But a heck of a guy. Some people, that was a great thing. A person I miss from my fan days, I never got to work with him, and he's long gone, is there was a guy who was a superb Batman artist named Don Newton.
I've heard the name.
He was in the late 70s, and the early 80s. And look it up sometime. You will be very pleased. Just beautiful, beautiful work. And I used to talk with him on the phone just before I was in the business, and we'd have great conversations. He was somewhere in the Midwest, as I recall, and was just a great guy. I used to talk to everyone. That's one thing I didn't discuss is before I was ever a professional, for years in the 80s, before 83, so like 81, 82, 83, I was a letter hack of note.
Mm-hmm.
I had hundreds of letters in comics. I remember being at a convention once in 82, just before I was in the business, and a guy came up to me and heard someone mention my name, and they said, "You're Johnny Wilcox?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Johnny Wilcox, 40 Hills Court, West Park, Connecticut, 06880." I said, "Yeah." And it's like, and I remember someone who was like thrilled to meet me was when John Byrne met me, because I had been appearing in different, like he had just started writing the Fantastic Four and that. And he was just so pleased to get to meet me. And I thought, how hilarious is that?
That's terrible. And I believe he's out near you somewhere, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I used to go see him. I don't know what town he's in now, but he used to be in Fairfield. He's moved several places.
Yeah.
And I remember once I did an interview with him, and he's like, "I challenge you to ask me a question I've never been asked." I said, "Why did you leave the Grateful Dead?" I said, "I was never in the Grateful Dead." I said, "Yeah, but were you asked that before?" I said, "No."
So, you succeeded.
Yeah. So the one thing I suppose, people watching that want to do comics, what I'd like to impress on them is think about kids. If there's one thing I think sometimes gets forgotten,
Mm-hmm.
is it started out, it was very much a kid's medium. Yes, adults read them, yes, teens, but think about doing books that touch and inspire kids. You might be inspiring a future cartoonist, you never know. But you have a chance to do through your work positive things. I always felt when I was like, I remember when I was writing Riverdale High for Archie, everything I wrote, I thought about 11-year-old girls somewhere in the Midwest. I remember I wrote a story where, do you know the character? Well, you worked in Archie, so you know. Big Ethel.
Yeah.
I had Big Ethel go on a date with Archie. It had never been done. And they have a great time. It starts out by accident because one of them sees the other one reading a magazine on scale model railroads. And the other says, "Oh, I love those. I'm going to a show they're having." "Really? Oh, let me go with you." And so they go, and it evolves into a date, and they have a great time. And Archie's even like thinking, if I was out with Betty, Veronica would be jealous. And if I was out with Veronica, Betty would be jealous. But neither of them, how can they get mad? I'm out with Ethel, and they have a great time. And at the end, he gives her a kiss and says, "We should do this again." And I said to my editor, I said, "I make a prediction. Every girl that feels she doesn't fit in is going to write you and thank you." And we got hundreds of letters from exactly that. And I thought, I knew that. And I thought, people that don't fit in deserve to know, oh, look, here's even in your comics that you read, you count, you matter.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, if you can do a piece of work and someone you don't even know, it made them smile, it made them cry, it made their day a better day because of something you did. What tops that?
Yeah. No, I agree. I always said, like, I do a lot of humor work, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
I usually target kids. Now, I don't know if I ever told you. I mean, I have my medical issues and stuff, but I spent time as a child in the hospital, and that's when I really got into comics. I mean, before that, I was really into cartoons, animating, and all that stuff. And I remember being 8 years old, sitting in the bed in the hospital, and my dad's secretary, my dad was a guidance counselor. His secretary gave him a bunch of stuff, like, people in the office gathered and got toys and whatever for me. But they got me a couple of comics, and one of them was a Mad magazine. I laughed so hard at that.
Now, around what year are we talking?
Oh God, I was about 8, so 1984 maybe.
Okay.
And I laughed really hard. That's when I first discovered Sergio's work, and became my favorite artist. But when I started, getting into comics and trying to do humor, I always said with my work, I don't care if they laugh at me or with me, as long as they laugh.
Yeah,
I've done my job. And it's the same thing, because I feel if you laugh, even if it's just a chuckle for a moment, any problem you've had has disappeared.
Oh yeah.
And if I can get someone to do that, what those comics did for me as a child in the hospital, or when I had to, when I got nervous as a kid with my medical issue, I escaped into the world of comics. I still do that, whether it's comics, animation, whatever it is. I escape into worlds, and that's what helped me learn, build, and wanting to do the same, for those kids. So
sure,
and that's why my work is geared towards kids. If I can get my work to that kid in the hospital who's scared or nervous, whatever their medical issue is, even if they're just in there because whatever, that's my target. That's what's important to me. And that's who I write for. I write for the 8-year-old Michael, who is nervous and scared. And what did I like as a kid? And I was a big Star Wars fan. I love sci-fi, so I write sci-fi. I love fantasy, so I do that. So I do a lot of sci-fi fantasy. I do superheroes, but I do other stuff, animal characters and things like that. And I always try to put a little humor into it. I did a picture, a little doodle. I don't know if I posted on Twitter, because I know that's where you guys are, at John A. Wilcox, guys. Make sure you follow him there. It was a quick digital doodle I did like night. It was Superman flying and Batman like tiptoeing, and it was tiptoeing through the tulips. The song popped in my head. I just had the pose. I don't know why. And Superman saying something like, "Hey Batman, try not to destroy those tulips, will you?" or whatever. And it's just a simple, funny little doodle, but it worked and made me chuckle. And it's like, if I was a kid, I would have found that really funny.
Yeah. Oh, I had years ago. Unfortunately, I had to sell it. Thankfully, it found a great home. Because there's a guy that used to do a lot of Disney stuff. Maybe he still does. Named Kino Don Rosa.
Yeah, he's still doing it, from what I understand.
But I got a drawing from him that appeared in a comic fanzine years ago.
Okay.
And it was Dr. Doom taking off his helmet, and he's revealed as Donald Duck.
Oh.
And it just cracked me up. And I had asked, any chance I could get my hands on that? And he sent it to me. It was just beautiful.
That's great.
But it's funny you mentioned Argones. I went to the San Diego Comic-Con exactly once. And it was, I understand, it was sort of the end of the era one, because it was 1989. And after that, it really became more and more about the movies.
Yeah.
In fact, that year, the first Batman movie was out. But I was there, and Argones, I kept running into him throughout the weekend. And every time I ran into him, he insisted on doing me a new drawing. So I have all these drawings. Oh, do you remember this character I did? Yeah. Oh, here you go. But the cool thing that happened beyond that, I mean, that was cool in and of itself, is I was in on the day before they let the public in, where it was just the pros,
Yeah.
And who did me a drawing? Talk about feeling like a little kid. Mobius.
Wow.
I still have it. And it's like, I remember seeing when they had done the first heavy metal movie, and they did Tarna, that was based on his stuff. And he always had these like flying pterodactyl kind of things. And he had these characters that, I know he did this, and used to be a thing he did called Arzak. And they had these guys wearing these tall hats, and it's one of the guys in the tall hats riding one of those over mountains. And he just was like sat, and he goes, "Here you go." And I was, and then as if that wasn't enough, I'm walking and there's these two old guys and I'm talking to them and they tell me who they are. And I'm like, oh, they wanted to get from one place to the other without people hassling them. And they were two of the 9 old men, Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson.
Wow.
And I said, here, go down this side of me and we'll go over. And we did. And they were they signed me something and gave it to me. They were great. So, and then following the Disney thing, Willie Ito was there, another.
Yeah.
And Willie invited me to a party that they're having because they were just about to release. He said, I think this is going to do well this year. It was a little movie called The Little Mermaid.
Oh.
And so they invited me to this Disney party.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at this, in the penthouse of this place with a glass roof that opens up. So it opens up and we're looking up at the San Diego sky. Well, there was a Dixieland band playing and I'm thinking, why am I here? What did I do to, and then I had I had a fun time because then I spent a lot of time with the Hernandez brothers, Love and Rockets.
Yeah.
And they were a scream. And, a childhood favorite of mine, Forrest J. Ackerman, who used to do Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine.
Oh. Yeah.
And I said to him, I've always wanted to meet the man who perverted my youth. And he looked next to me and goes, well, where is that youth I perverted? and so he was great. And then it was the second time I saw Kirby. He was there, but that time he was getting to be old man. His faculties weren't quite as sharp as they once were, but he was a good deal. I think at that time he must have been 70, 75, 74, something like that. Had to be just before 75 because I ended up doing a drawing. I still have it. I did a drawing of the Thing smoking a cigar, wishing Jack a happy birthday, and Joe Sinnott asked if he could ink it. Oh. Can you? Yes. So I still have that. I had a friend of mine frame it. It's like, wow, it's me lamely drawing the Thing, artfully saved by Joe Sinnott's, wonderful inks.
Oh wow!
So, and just to be inked by Joe, that's a
master
in and of itself.
Yeah, his inks are gorgeous.
Oh yeah, his pencils. A lot of people forget. He was the first artist on Thor.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. You're right.
He used to show me stuff over at his house, and I was talking with his son Mark, and they still have it, thankfully. He liked Stan Drake's Heart of Juliet Jones strip, and so he did his own version of it. He did one daily, and it looked like he penciled it and inked it, but he penciled it in Stan's style and inked it in his style, and that was just wild. He did that. He had a couple of strips where he drew them in other people's style. It was like really neat, total fanboy stuff.
Yeah, and you sometimes you don't think people at that level are fanboys will fanboy out over things,
Oh yeah, well that's that Joe, outside of his big loves being, there was a guy in the war who ended up being an actor in films named Audie Murphy. And I think Audie served in the same regiment that Joe's brother did, who died in World War II. Mm-hmm. So he was a big Audie Murphy fan. He was a big Bing Crosby fan. But he was a big adventure strip fan from the 20s, 30s, 40s. And that's what we talked about, that kind of stuff. I mean, talking about Scorchy Smith and another big one, Barney Baxter, which was another airplane strip that Joe just loved. So fun stuff, and again, a lot of guys, they made no, particularly the bigger the pro, and sometimes, in some cases, the bigger the fan.
Yeah.
I think my one time, I've only ever been tongue-tied once, and it was early on. And it was because I just couldn't, sometimes you just can't believe that you're in a room with this person. So I was at this event here in Westport with all these cartoonists, and I'm fine, Oh boy, here's Gil Kane, who was great, and I had him draw me. At the time, he was doing a comic strip called Starhawks.
I have the collection on the other
and
side.
There's a character in there named Finity Quark, who's the woman. She's got a big long ponytail. And he drew me Finity Quark. Kurt Swan is there. He's drawing everyone Superman. I went over to Kurt. I said, "Hey, Kurt, how about want to draw me Lois Lane?" He goes. He grabbed my shoulder and squeezed. He goes, "Thank you, thank you."
And he is my favorite Superman artist.
And he was. I don't know if you ever met Kurt, but he was an absolutely great guy. He was wonderful. I spent so much time with him. But the one person that was there in the room where I was like, I cannot say a word. And nowadays I would have tried to talk his ear off. Was the great Bern Hogarth.
Oh my God. Yeah.
The Tarzan artist. I mean, although I can make the same argument for Foster too. He did wonderful Tarzan. And he looked, this is going to sound stupid. Bern Hogarth looked just like Bern Hogarth. I'd see pictures of him and it's like, wow, that guy looks just like Bern Hogarth because it is. Yeah. I don't believe I can talk to him. I was too intimidated. But I did have, God, I'm going to go up on the guy's name, Roland Wilson. Now, Roland Wilson was a guy, he used to do a lot of comic strip work and a lot of illustrations for TV Guide and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he was also a Disney animator.
Okay.
And he was there. And he had, he had a little beverage in him, let's say. And he said, because I was getting little sketches when I could, he said, "Tell me a situation and I'll draw it." I said, a frog in a blender.
Oh my God.
And he said, "You happen to have run into one of the world's great blender artists." And he drew me this blender with this little rotating frog head. And he put it, he goes, "Next time order a grasshopper." Huh. And I still have that. I have that. It's a little postcard-sized drawing. I keep that with my postcard-sized drawing that Alex Toth did me of Plastic Man.
Oh, my God.
He sent me a postcard, and it's his neck and head winding around the card.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Alex used to correspond with me, and he would tell me things like, "John, you live in the Greens Farms part of Westport, Connecticut, which is where Harold Gray grew up and spent most of his adult life working on Little Orphan Annie. So I think you should write a book on him," which I never thought I should do. But he would just come up with these things, and it was just great. And you'd get like a little 3x5 postcard, and he would fill up every inch of the front and back with either text or a little piece of art or anything. And it was all in that Alex Toth handwriting,
I got to pull this out. I have this this book. You ever see that one?
Oh, good Lord, yes.
Oh my God. I'll flip through this looking at the artwork, just even seeing his handwriting,
And that's how he always was. He was a cranky old guy.
Oh my God.
But he was as brilliant as it gets.
Yeah.
You look at that stuff and you go, how is it that everyone doesn't sit there and go, this is what I aspire to?
I know. He's
because think about all the animated stuff he did. Yeah. Think of those character designs that everyone has seen a million times, Super Friends, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the ease that he did it, just like I knew a guy, someone who was a friend of mine that was a Hanna-Barbera guy, interesting man, a lot of fun, was a guy named Marty Murphy. Mm-hmm. Now, how you would know Marty Murphy is he created Hong Kong Phooey.
Yes.
And there used to be a show called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, yes, which was sort of, and those were Marty's shows. Mm-hmm. And then later on, a lot of people don't know this, there was a show on cable in the 80s, a kid thing called Maya the Bee. And he did Maya the Bee as well. All the time, he was also working for Playboy and anyone that would have him. And we were talking on the phone once, and I was heavy into the Marvel work.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I'm teaching a class. He said, do you think you could possibly think about sending me some color? And I had just gotten in a Marvel Comics Presents story of a character called Torpedo.
Okay.
So I sent him the Torpedo. It was an 11-page story. And he sent me back a large full-color watercolor painting from Playboy. Mm-hmm. I think I did the better part of that one,
Actually, I want to show you something real quick because you make me take down everything in my studio. Everything I look around is because of inspiration. And we were just talking about Toth. And, oh, God. Right here. This is a print from the show. I forget the name of the show, but this was The Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera or something.
Yeah.
And these
were Shazam and...
Yep, all his designs here.
Is that the Mighty Mightor in there?
Mighty, who's my favorite of the superheroes. You got the Herculoids in there.
Is Ukula the Mock in there?
Yep, Ukula. Oh no, that's from Ukula the Mock's from Thundar. That was.
That's right. That was Kirby, right?
That was Kirby. Yeah. No, this has the Fantastic Four in here.
It has their. Oh, it's only a coincidence that it's exactly like Gigantor Frankenstein Jr.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to love that show. Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles. Are you kidding me?
So it's probably the one Hanna-Barbera DVD that I've watched more than like 5 times. And I have huge Hanna-Barbera fan. If I was to turn this laptop around and hold it, I have 4 shelves of Hanna-Barbera like pop figures.
I'm going to recommend something to you if you've never seen it. Mm-hmm. Get it. You can get this really inexpensively. Have you ever seen the Super 6?
Yes, I got a DVD of them as well.
Oh, you got it too from Patty Freely. Isn't that stuff great?
They're fantastic.
Super Boing, who's really Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah,
that's all that stuff. That it's really that kind of psychedelic Carnaby Street pop culture design. I used to watch that. I used to watch, the Herculoids, Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles. I go back even before that. There were a couple of cartoons that I found out later were out of England. One called Dodo, the Kid from Outer Space.
I don't think I know that one.
He's a science fiction pixie from a strange atomic race. Dodo, the Kid from Outer Space. And it was like really an educational thing. And then there was an educational science fiction and science one called The Big World of Little Atom.
I don't know if I know
That's all from like 64, 65. So
it's rare if I don't know a cartoon. I got to be honest with you. I've studied a lot.
I have some artwork from, talk about obscure. So TTV, who were an offshoot of J Ward. TTV did Underdog and all that. I have storyboards from the Beagles, which was there. It was 2 guys, but it was to cash in on the Beatles craze.
Yeah. I think I watched something on YouTube with them.
There's a couple of things with bits of them.
And were they the same people who did the Super 6? Or no?
No, because that was DePatie Freeling.
Okay, because the
TV did Tennessee Tuxedo.
Okay,
Gophers, Commander McBragg.
Yeah.
I said Beagles, Klondike Cat. I'll make meat out of that mouse. Savoir-faire is everywhere.
Yes. No, because the one I was thinking of then, they did like a James Bond parody. The same people did Super 6, I think. It was like James Hound or something. And yes, and that's the one I was thinking of. Sorry.
Yeah, James Hound. I haven't seen that in a long time, but I have seen it. Yeah. You want to find the Vaults of Obscurity? It's not very good, but it's worth seeing at least one, and you can find this. Trust me. Mm-hmm. Super President.
I've heard of that.
He's a president, and he has superpowers, and he fights. It's some of the absolute low point of cartoons. I missed Yippee Yappy and Yahooey.
Love them too.
It was just as they would say, a groaner. Super President.
Yeah. No, I think I've watched. I don't know if I've watched a full episode, but I've seen a clip like on YouTube or something somewhere, just researching old cartoons.
That was another. I mean, my childhood, cartoon-wise, was Gigantor, Peter Potamus.
Yeah.
The horror that was Clutch Cargo with Paddlefoot. and whatever the dog's name was, where they called it Synchrovox, where it was just a drawing with the lips moving. It was human lips.
Yes, I remember that.
Frightening. The stuff of nightmares.
But
and of course, Winky Dink. I even saw reruns of Winky Dink where you were supposed to put a magic screen over your TV and then draw in like the stairs he'd walk down.
I believe that was my dad's era.
Yeah, I saw it in reruns.
Yeah, and they didn't have that when I was a kid in reruns, but I watched Peter Potamus and McGill the Gorilla all in reruns because I was born in '76.
That's, by the way, a heartbreak, and I hope they rectify it in the future. What? When they put out a box set of McGill the Gorilla cartoons, Hanna-Barbera, the one thing it's missing is the McGill the Gorilla song.
Oh, yeah.
It's the cartoons that just take it from the title bumper and not the little, because the little beginning is the same on all of them, but they didn't put it on that. At least maybe they've done a subsequent pressing. Just like I have the Josie the Pussycats box set, and the audio sways so badly in it.
Oh, does it?
It's like you took a 45 and pushed it all the way to the side on a turntable. Which is like it should have a sticker that says "No care went into this package."
I don't have any of the Josie boxes, but I was a big fan of Josie and the Pussycats in Outer Space. I love.
Yeah, well, same stuff. Yeah, again, Toth stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
With was it the bleep? Yeah, I always get that confused because the bleep was that little thing with the antennas that Melody had in space, as opposed to Debbie the Bloop in Lost in Space, which was the monkey with antennas on its ears.
Yeah.
Look how low we've gone. We should probably wrap up for tonight and talk again sometime.
I would love to have you back and
anytime.
More stories.
I'll even wear a different hat.
Sounds good. Maybe I'll wear one. Cover up this.
There you go. We'll both wear. We'll each send each other a hat to wear.
I would go for that.
So it's been a lot of fun. I feel like I've been on here for 5 minutes.
Wow. I'm glad to hear that. It means you had a good time. And, yeah. We
haven't even touched it. There's so much to be talked about.
Oh, totally. I mean, I just talking about hearing your stories were great, but to know the knowledge that you have that we didn't discuss, that we've talked about privately, we
barely scratched comic strips, and
I know we haven't even touched that.
So much beyond that, much less. Well, music is a whole different topic. I have a whole career in music.
Well, we're gonna bring you back. I'll bring you back definitely in the new year, and because I'm booked till the end of the month here, but I'll bring you back definitely in the new year. And
let me interrupt you and say to any writer or artist thinking about this, if they hear from you, you're going to be treated well, you're going to love it, you're going to have a great time. So do it.
Yeah. It's comics, any of the industries, it does have its little problems here and there, but it really is the best to work with. I don't know another industry that I've worked in that has been more fun. I've been a graphic designer, I've been a puppeteer, I've done video editing, I've been in education for years. Every business that you're in, you're going to have some kind of issue with, but I don't think I've had more fun. I'm doing a project with a friend right now for a publisher, and it's only a 3-page backup story, but just talking with my friend about it and working this way and the way we're working, it's just like, this is great. And I'm going to be, as soon as I finish up my Christmas card tomorrow, that's like my next project to do. Besides a commission I have as a Christmas gift for someone. But
I have some more birdhouses to do, and beyond that, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna ask you to hold on backstage for a moment, but I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank everybody who watched tonight, and everybody who will be watching this in the future in reruns. This really was a fun time. I honestly could sit here and talk to John for hours.
Oh, me too.
And there's so much. And now that we just started talking about Hanna-Barbera, and it's like I can go off even just on that topic alone for hours.
Mm-hmm. How many Hanna-Barbera shows were based on, in some way, the Honeymooners?
Yeah, exactly. But I'm gonna put you backstage. I'm gonna let you,
be gentle.
Yes. Thank you again. I really did have a lot of fun, and I hope the audience did too. All right.
Me too. Take care.
All right, and don't forget to follow John at John A. Wilcox on Twitter.
Yep.
See you all. All right, guys. So that was tonight's interview with John. I'm telling you, I'm bringing him back. He's a fantastic guy. Tons of stories that we didn't even touch upon. His knowledge in comic history, both in strips and in books, unbelievable. And I also know from talking to him, he's got an unbelievable collection of stuff. And maybe next time we can have him bring a few pieces on that we can discuss. But I want to let you know, next Tuesday, I'm actually going to have two of my old co-workers from my college days, from teaching college, not from back when I was in college, who got together, formed their own little comic book company. And I don't want to call it little, but I mean, it's the two of them, so it's little that way. But they're doing some really great stuff. And so I'm going to have on Christian DiMatteo, who is the writer, and James Lyons, who is the artist of the two. And both fantastic guys. I'm going to tell you, this is not something to miss. James's talent as an artist, wow. Okay, that's all I got to say is wow. So come back next week, 8:30 Eastern, and let's and get in tune with Christian and James. All right. Have a great night, guys. See you later.